So I guess I can go through, this is some of the things I was just talking about, some of the resources. Just to give you a quick look at that was UWorld, the AMC prep bundle. Some other ones I didn't use, but I've heard they were helpful, is the Kaplan Q Bank and their content books as well. I have these content books, but I just didn't use them, so I put them here just because I had them. And then the Jack Weston. Anki flashcards, it's not necessarily a resource, but it's more of a tool you can use to kind of help review content. I don't know if you guys, did any of you guys use Anki or heard of Anki? Yes, I see some nods. Yeah, so Anki is basically like a virtual flashcard. So you can have like physical flashcards, but these are almost like a virtual flashcards you can use. And it also kind of it keeps track of like if you're going to forget something in 3 days, it will automatically schedule out when you should review certain flashcards to make sure they're kind of top of mind for you. So that was for me very helpful in terms of making sure I was constantly getting repetitions of what I was learning within the MCAT. So to answer Holly's question now into more details of what the exact schedule that I used in terms of day to day and the process. And for me, that looked a little bit different dependent on where I was in my study process. And I say a year, but it really was more or less like 7 months. And in terms of studying, and just depending on like where you're at, what you're studying, or how strong a foundation you have. You can do this within like 3 months, like if you're doing it over a summer, or you can do it over, you can spread it out over a year if you have that much time, or even over a year if you even have that much more time. So for me, it was one of the foundation pieces in deciding like where to schedule out things was where your knowledge is, mainly in like your science knowledge. So for myself, coming in with like the post-baccalaureate program, it gave me a little bit more of like a review of most of the sciences. So I felt pretty good in terms of like the biology sections, but I didn't retake like physics or chemistry. So I knew those were areas I probably needed to spend more time in. So just depending on like if you are in your sophomore year or your junior year of undergrad, if there are those classes that you either haven't taken yet or already taken yet, make sure you're, taking good notes. And even as you're going over, for example, like summer breaks or holiday breaks, sometimes it's good to kind of go through your notes and just review them a little bit, because that will just keep some of that information fresh in your mind. So when you get to the MCAT studying part, you have a lot of that foundation still there. It's not like lost in the outdoors. So for me, breaking it down into 7 months, I'll kind of go through this just high level. And then if you guys have questions, I can answer more detail. So the first month for me was just like gathering my college notes. So kind of like I was saying, if you have good notes from undergrad, it's going to help you out with MCAT. So don't just throw away your notes. So if you have like virtual notes, if you keep something in like OneNote or Google Drive or any type of digital notes, particularly in those like Bio 101s, chemistry, physics, psych soc, those subjects, if you have your notes for those, it's going to be very helpful in terms of giving that foundation. And this is another way to kind of supplement using those gigantic content books from Kaplan and things. If you have your own notes, you can reference that as well, and it's in your own words. So sometimes it's better to learn from something you've created as well. So that first month was gathering my notes there and then determining the study materials. And for me, it was like the AMC bundle and UWorld. And then in that first month was when I took my first full length. So this is where you want to get like a baseline of where you're at with your exam score to kind of see, okay, where do I stand? And for me, I did not review this. So once I took the test, it was strictly to get the score. So you'll hear like different kind of advice. Some people will say, take the full length, review everything from the full length and see like see what your strengths and weaknesses are, things like that. But for me, I use it as just as a way to get an evaluation of this is where I am, this is my number. And in terms of the subject matters, it was, you know, you can kind of see your scores on the subjects, but not necessarily going through each question and reviewing it, because that's a lot of time. So going through just to review content is also, it takes a long time to do. So I found it more beneficial just to use a full length as a metric to say this is where I'm at versus as a review or study tool. That was how I used it for that first month, was just for that. And then for as I transitioned into like that middle period, so this could be like, this was for like months 2 through 5. This is when I heavily was in UWorld. So the method I use is called question-based learning. You can Google it as well, question-based learning. I adapted it from, I took a course called How to Dominate Pre-Med, or the MCAT without an expensive MCAT course. It's a course by Andre Pineset, or Dr. Andre Pineset. So I took that. It's like a strategy course that he teaches. So I took that course, and one of the things that he was recommending was question-based learning. And I highly recommend it myself. It worked for me in terms of using the questions. The idea is that you're using the questions to kind of guide your learning. So as you do questions within UWorld, for example, you'll say you got the question right or question wrong. Either way, you review the answers, and you use that review as a way to study the content, as well as you can dive further into information that you don't know. And I use this as an opportunity to create flashcards or take notes on things that I wasn't familiar with or didn't have like expertise in. And this was a process that you kind of have fun with. You can create mnemonics, create pictures, whatever you want to do to make it sticky in your head. And then throughout those months 2 to 5, I also drilled myself on those same flashcards I was creating. And that was I used using Anki, but you can use pretty much any platform like Quizlet, or if you want to do it like physical flashcards, it's just dependent on what you're comfortable with. But I did a daily drill just to make sure I was recalling everything I was learning each day. So that was also helpful. And towards the tail end is when I took a second exam. So this might be surprising. So some people will say, take a lot of full lengths, take a lot of, do a lot of practice exams. So for me, I only took one at the beginning, and then 2 months before my exam, I took the second one. So again, I was using these as like evaluation. So after I put all those work in from like month 2 to 5, month 6 was when I more focused on, okay, let me reevaluate where I'm at after I put all that, almost like you're training for like a sport, putting all that training in, and now you're kind of, here's your pre-game or your practice game that you're doing. So that was more so in month 6, taking that exam again. And then I started bringing in the AEMC material. So one piece of advice I did get from for this was that, so the AEMC, like I said before, is very close to what you'll see on the exam, and it's very like good material. So you don't want to waste it. There's not a lot of it. You don't want to waste all of it. So the advice I got was, don't start with the AEMC material, because if you do all of it up front, and then maybe you're taking the test a year from now, when you get closer to your actual exam day, you may not have enough AEMC material to practice with. So I started bringing in the AEMC material like 2 months before my actual exam day. And this included, for me, in order of like the most useful things was like the section bank. The section banks are very much close to what you'll see on the test. Cars, I would do everything that's cars. And then the things I thought were just okay were like the independent question banks. They had an official guide, MCAT exam questions, and they had subject question bank or subject question packs. So all the names can be confusing. So you might not know where to start. So from the way I looked at it was, Subject question packs may be a little bit misguided. So it seems like they would be very helpful, which I think they are somewhat helpful, but they're technically were taken from the old MCAT and just adapted for the new MCAT. So sometimes they're not, the question type is not formatted in how you would see it on the actual exam. So that's just something to think about. It's good in terms of content, but it's not exactly how you'll see it on the actual MCAT. And then the last thing was I continued to drill the same Ankis daily on that front. And my last month continued to bring in AMC material and continue to do the drilling. But I did take, I started taking a test, a full length test weekly. So every single week leading up to my exam week, I took a full length test, and I only took the AMC full length test. I didn't take any outside materials test. So this is also a way to save money. So instead of buying like 100 different resources from different companies, so for example, I literally just focused on UWorld and the WAMC material. And those are the primary resources that I used. In particular, for the full length as well, I didn't take one the week of my actual exam, just so that's not too much overload, but there's only, I think, 5 full lengths for AMC. So that's another thing. You don't want to waste those as well. So I tried to put the weight to use those towards the end as well, so that I wasn't using them all up at the beginning. So that was pretty much what I covered within that. If you guys have any questions on just that as well, I'm happy to answer anything.
I'm looking at the chat, Charisma and Jessica's questions, and I think you covered some of it. But I like Jessica's question about staying motivated, particularly if as you're going through some of these practice runs and maybe not doing as well, maybe feeling discouraged. Like, did that happen to you, and how did you bounce back from that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the big piece here, in which what helped a lot, was taking that course that I talked about, and the Andre Pinesett course on how to dominate the MCAT without an expensive MCAT course. I think that's the full name. But that course was really helpful in giving like a layout, and in terms of even what I'm sharing here is pretty much adapted from that, was in this period here. So in that middle period where I'm just did UWorld in drills, this is almost like, I don't know, it's like the fun time of studying the MCAT, because you don't have to worry about taking full length exams. You're not worried about a score. You're not worried about like, am I getting what I'm getting right, what I'm getting wrong. This is more like learning. So this is almost like if you take yourself back to, I don't know, like you're an Einstein or something, and you're just like self-learning, and this is almost like you're engaging with the material. So what was motivating for me in this phase was, one being that I wasn't focused on a score. I was more so thinking about, my goal for today is just to learn something. I don't care if I learn one thing, 2 things, but it's just to learn something. And so with that, it kind of alleviated the pressure of having to say, okay, let me get through this chapter of biochemistry in my content review. It was more of, let me just do for example, I did like a set of maybe 10 questions. Let me do a set of 10 questions, and then I review those 10 questions. And I would give myself as much time as I needed to review those questions. So I didn't put time constraints on myself of, I need to review these questions within 10 minutes. It was, if it took 2 hours, it took 2 hours. And that way it gave me time to just, again, have fun with the material. If I needed to dive deep into it, even coming up with the mnemonics, I think that was like the most fun for me, was just like coming up with like mnemonics, putting in stories about my friends, my families. I would even like grab pictures from people on Facebook, put it on my mnemonics in my Anki flashcards. And it was more for like just a fun way to learn. And again, the big thing for me was not thinking about a number, because if I was thinking about a number, it would add more pressure. But also a good way in terms of keeping motivated is still doing the things that you love to do. So I didn't study like all day, every day when I was studying the MCAT. If there was times I needed to take a break, I would take a break. If there were, fun things that you like to do, if you like to volunteer, if you're into certain hobbies, can put those into your schedule, and keep it in your schedule. Don't take them out. So that way you're motivated by the things you already like to do. And then studying the MCAT is just something fun to do on top of that, right? That was I have I think a last slide of my day-to-day schedule, but if there's another question, I'll answer that one first.
So take a little pause
No
here.
question.
And what we'll do after this last slide, Crystal, is William, I'll have you come up and review we found Crystal, a free study guide through the Student Doctor Network that looked pretty promising. So William's going to talk a little bit about that, and would also love to hear your reaction to that resource after he shows it. So yeah, so let's see that last slide.
Okay, yeah. So my last slide, I just want to give an idea of how I organize my schedule, and you can feel free to screenshot this, or if I can send it's like an Excel, so I can probably send it out to Holly if she wants to send it out as well. But pretty much I use this to just to organize myself on what is my day-to-day schedule going to look like, or what is an ideal week of me studying look like. So the first thing I did was I put in my days off. So I put in, okay, Sunday, I'm taking a day off, and I put in the things I've already liked to do. So on Thursdays, I volunteered. So I put that in there. So my Thursdays was also technically my day off, plus I did volunteering that day. So I already put in 2 days that were dedicated to my volunteering and days off as well. And for my schedule, I was doing this mainly full time. So I wasn't like taking classes, or I wasn't working. So this allowed me to have more flexibility within my schedule. But if you are working, or if you're taking classes, go ahead and put that in your schedule as well. So for example, if you're taking classes, or if you're working in a lab, go ahead and put those blocks in there. And sometimes I remember when I was working in the lab, you can kind of like determine the hours you should be in the lab. So try to even organize your schedule in that way, where maybe you put you're studying in the mornings, but maybe you go to labs more at the end of the day, or you go in the lab once a week or twice a week versus 4 days a week, things like that. But yeah, so I use this to kind of just organize how I would do my cadence of the day. So for example, I would wake up first thing in the morning, have an hour to kind of either get ready, breakfast, whatever it may be. And then I would do the Ankis. So the Ankis is what I was referring to with like flashcards. So every morning I always started off with the flashcards. So the flashcards were basically me doing a repetition or a review of the material that I was learning from my content from the questions-based learning. So that was one of the things like I stuck to. I tried to stick to that, like if I could every day. If I missed a day, it was fine. I just picked it up the next day. But some people skip this step, and I would say do not skip this step. So the repetition of your content is going to be the game changer, in that you'll be able to, as you're practicing recalling the information through like Ankis or flashcards, is going to be very similar to when you're on the exam, because the MCAT exam is a recognition test. So the faster you're able to recognize and recall something is what you need to practice. So when I did the Ankis, is literally what you're doing. You're practicing recognizing a concept and recalling either their answer or some concept related to that topic. So practicing that each day will help you when you're actually taking the exam, because you'll see something and you'll recognize it. So I just wanted to put a plug in for that. But I just wanted to point out a few things here, was that I also intentionally put in breaks throughout. So I had a break after I do my studying, my flashcards. Then I would have study blocks. And I intentionally put in these 2-hour study blocks. When you're taking the MCAT, each section is about an hour and a half per section, right? So if you're able to keep your your attention span for 2 hours, you can keep your attention span for an hour and a half or for 90 minutes. I think that's a section. So that's another thing I did intentionally, was making sure I had like 2 hour study blocks that I was doing my UWorld, essentially. And then I would take breaks. Then I would go back 2 hours, take breaks, go back into 2 hours. So it was very kind of consistent along that front. But yeah, I would, if you guys want to use something similar or make it your own, feel free. But I just wanted to point out that if you can kind of just look at the colors, the studies in green, and then everything else is kind of like my own time. So I did have a lot of free time or rest time or breaks or lunch breaks, dinner breaks built in. So even though I was studying full time, it's very manageable if you intentionally put in those like breaks in there. And I always got 8 hours of sleep, so I never had to pull all-nighters either.
That is great to hear.
Yeah.